chugging sounds you hear were recorded in 1990 in Pennsylvania. They were made by the same locomotive whose image was just shown in the title. At that time, she was running on the Knox and Cane Railroad in northwest Pennsylvania as number SY1658, but that was often shortened to number 58. The locomotive is often called a Mikado because of her wheel configuration. Here she is running tall and proud, doing excursion duty from Marionville, Pennsylvania to the Kinzig Bridge in 1990. Tragedy struck in 2008. The Mikado was severely damaged in an engine house arson fire in Kane, Pennsylvania on March 17th. Few felt that she could be salvaged, but the keen eye of J. David Conrad and the Valley Railroad engine house gang saw it differently. So they purchased the locomotive at auction in October of 2008. This November 2008 picture is perhaps the saddest in the life of the Mikado. Pennsylvania snow blankets the locomotive as she is lifted off of her wheels in preparation for shipment. She was shipped by truck back to the Valley Railroad in Essex, Connecticut. She has been given a new number, Valley 3025. Here we see the Mikado about to enter the engine house at Essex. The engine house gang immediately began the remarkable process of restoring the locomotive. To those watching from a distance, the result seemed miraculous. In a little over 3 years of skilled restoration, the Mikado came back to life. Here she is seen in the daylight as a complete locomotive for the first time since leaving Kane. Only a few days later, November 22nd, the Mikado shows she is fully functional as she highballs down to the Y at Old Saybrook. This is a diagram of the Y based on satellite photography. Consisting of 3 switches, negotiating a Y is somewhat like negotiating a 3-point turn in a car. Once reaching the Y, the Mikado was joined by an entourage from the Providence and Worcester Railroad, which escorted the 3025 through the Y. The Amtrack passenger station is visible. The helpers consisted of 3 diesels and 2 freight cars. This excellent video photography is provided by Chase J. Smith. We are watching the Mikado traverse the second leg of the Y. She is being pushed backwards in a northerly direction on the high-speed electrified main line between Boston and New York. This scene from just a little bit later shows that she has been detached from the Providence and Worcester helpers. The trailing black and red diesel of the escort is seen backing down the other leg of the Y. The 3025 is now pointing north, operating under its own power. She is ready to return to Essex to begin her new duties. This video project documents my recent experience with the Valley Railroad's Your Hand on the Throttle program. It is intended to allow me to organize my collection of materials and thoughts from the experience and share them with my family and friends. This work is my own initiative and has not been sponsored in any way by the Valley Railroad. Any comments are greatly appreciated.
With an engineer that's brave, we must make the run successful from the cradle to the grave. Watch the curves, the hills
That catchy little country western song introduces us to one of the more interesting activities at the Valley Railroad. That is the Your Hand on the Throttle program. The spring of 2012 was the first time Valley 3025 was available for this assignment. Prior to the event, each participant is mailed useful study materials. Each participant receives a 1-hour class on safety and theory before his turn in the locomotive. The classes were conducted in this dining car by J. David Conrad. I was fortunate to be able to participate in that program on April 15th, 2012. That's me in the cab. This is the departure by the 10 a.m. April 15, 2012 participant on his run. There is nowhere to turn the locomotive, so the experience consists of going north while going forward along the river for about 30 minutes or so. Then the locomotive returns to Essex stations in reverse over the same tracks. I learned that engineering while backing up a road engine is one of the most difficult things. Since your eyes have to be on the track over the tender, you must reach back for the throttle brake and reversing lever as J. David Conrad is doing above. Another example of a good engineer backing up is this photo of Sloan Cornell, owner of the Knox and Kane Railroad. The photo is captured from a 1990 video. He is at the controls of Knox and Kane 58, which became Valley 3025. Here we see Your Hand on the Throttle returning to Essex Station in reverse. Later in the spring, the Mikado began a new chapter of service. It began hauling passengers as a part of the Valley's train and riverboat program. I filmed this sequence with my friend and video photographer, Francie Long. One of the options available to the Valley Railroad patrons is a scenic cruise on the Connecticut River on the riverboat Becky Thatcher. Let's turn our focus back to Pennsylvania. So what became of the Knox and Kane? What led to the auction of the entire railroad, tracks, rolling stock, property, and all? To answer that, we must first go back to the beginning. Sloan Cornell established the Knox and Kane Railway by purchasing the northwest subdivision of the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad in 1982. To be totally correct, it was the Chesapeake and Ohio at that time. The B&O had decided to cease operations on the branch. The Knox and Kane Railroad owner made two excellent business decisions early on. One of these was the leasing of the Kinzua Bridge from the state of Pennsylvania. By laying 4 miles of track from Mount Jewett, he was able to make the Kinzua Bridge a part of his railroad. And the other good decision was the ordering of the construction of the locomotive SY 1658M from the Chinese. There was no American manufacturer of a steam locomotive in 1990. The 90s were the glory days for the railroad. Here we see the 1658 running through the forests of Pennsylvania on its way to the Kinzua Bridge and then finally crossing it. Daily excursions originating in Marionville traveled through the scenic Allegheny National Forest to and across the Kinzua Bridge. It provided riders with one of the most spectacular excursions in the eastern United States. Then the first of two major calamities struck the railroad. The second one, of course, being the March 2008 fire at Kane. The first occurred on July 21, 2003. An F1 tornado destroyed the Kinzua Bridge. The loss ultimately meant the end of the line for the Knox and Kane Railroad. Ridership on the railroad dropped off sharply and revenues plummeted. The railroad struggled to keep operating. Operations ceased at the end of the 2004 season. A few months after the 2008 fire, the auction was held. The Kovalchik Salvage Company purchased the railroad for salvage purposes. The salvage company began removing the tracks. They started in the south at the Shippensburg Y, which is near Clarion. They worked north from there toward Kane. As of October 2012, the crews had reached Marionville, which means about half of the tracks have been removed. There are plans in the works to convert the 97-mile right-of-way into rails-to-trails bike paths. Thus, the Northwest Sub will continue to contribute to the region for years to come.